Hello, I'm Khalid Ashur. Today we are going to talk about some more strategies and skills you can use in speaking. We want to use them to enhance and improve our speaking skills. Our main focus today will be on ways of expressing advice and suggestions. Why do we have to learn about advice and suggestions? Actually, all of us, every day, we face situations in which we have to give advice, we ask for advice, or sometimes some person or some other people suggest things to us and we have to suggest things to other people. Let's go on and see. Here are some expressions we can use to offer advice and suggestions. I think. You'd better not. You should. You must. You ought to. What about? How about? My advice is, or my suggestion is. If I were you, I would. I advise you to. It might be a good idea too. Let's. All these expressions can be used to offer advice and suggestions. Even this one, why don't you? I suggest, I propose, I recommend. And now let's study the structure we should follow when we use these expressions. You'd better. You should. You must. You ought to. If I were you, I would. I advise you to. It might be a good idea too. Let's. All these expressions should be followed by an infinitive. An infinitive is the base form of the verb, the root of the verb, and the verb without any additions. So when we say play, it's an infinitive. Plays, playing is not needed here because they are not infinitives. There is an addition, s, and there is an addition, ing, in reads and reading. So we need only to use read. Let's see some examples to see how they are used. If I were you, I would start planning a trip to Africa. Why don't you try South Africa first? We should read the offer to see what the conditions are. You ought to work hard and schedule your time. As you can see here, after all these expressions, we use the stem verb, the infinitive, this one in red. Let's study the structure we should follow when we use these expressions. What about? How about? They are different. They need a different structure. What about? How about should be followed by verb plus ing. Let's see some examples. What about visiting our uncle tomorrow? What about visiting? This is the stem verb plus ing. How about going to the doctor? How about going to the doctor? Some expressions have different structures. They can be used in different ways, like these. I suggest. I propose. I recommend. All these expressions can be followed by two things. Either they can be followed by that you plus infinitive. I suggest that you follow my instructions. I propose that you read your books well. I recommend that you choose a nice country to travel to. Or you can even use the verb plus ing. I suggest visiting your uncle tomorrow. I propose going to Al Ain. Let's have some written examples for you to be clear. I suggest that you should tell your mother about this. This is one way. Another way is, I suggest telling your mother about this. Let's have one more example. I recommend that you ask your teacher to help you. Or, I recommend asking your teacher to help you. Let's categorize these expressions and classify them according to their functions. Number 1. Expressions used for offering advice and suggestions. The following expressions we can use to offer advice. We can use to offer suggestions. You should. You ought to. You must. My advice is. My suggestion is. Why don't you? Or why don't we? Why not? I suggest. I propose. I recommend that. Or I recommend having, playing, eating, etc. You'd better. Remember, all these can be used to offer advice and suggestions. Now, number 2. These are some expressions to be used in offering advice and suggestion in a polite way. May I offer you some advice? Could I offer you some advice? Personally, I think. If I were you, I would. It seems to me that you could, or that you might. How about? What about? It might be a good idea too. Again, remember that all these expressions can be used to offer advice and suggestion in a polite way. Number 3. Expressions for asking for advice and suggestions. It means when you ask for the advice or the suggestion. How can you? What's your advice? What's your suggestion? I need your advice. I need your suggestion. Do you have any suggestions? Do you have any advice? Any other suggestions? Now, let's go back and see that you can even ask for advice or for suggestion in a polite way. These can be used. Would you give some advice? Would you give me some advice? Would you offer me some advice or suggestions? I was wondering if you could or if you might give me some suggestions. Let's move on, and this is number 4. These expressions you can use when you respond to an advice or to a suggestion given by another person. That's a good idea. That's a good suggestion. What a good idea. What a good suggestion. That sounds great. Or that sounds good. That sounds like a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. Oh, that hadn't occurred to me. As you can see, these are different ways to respond to advice and suggestions. I'd like you to use them so often. Now let's move to another situation and have a look here. Look at this lovely kid. He's doing something wrong. Can you warn him? Would you give him any advice? What advice can you give? Yes, correct. I advise you to keep all dangerous things away from kids, away from children. Again, you should watch your kids at home. Don't allow them to play in the kitchen or to play with electrical appliances. In this way, we have learned a lot of things now and many ways and techniques that we can use to express advice and suggestions. I hope you can learn them well because we need them and you are going to use them every day because they are needed for everyday life situations. Wish you all the best in your studies. Thank you.